You fast forward to, and people that don't get enough credit and spoken about is Craig Hodges, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, guys who lost their career and were pretty much ousted, blackballed, so to speak, from the NBA, to LeBron James really taking athletes' platform and giving us a voice that traveled worldwide. What are your thoughts as far as sports and basketball in particular right now?
Well, I think LeBron has changed the game for a lot of people, and I mean he went so strong with it that it's given a lot of people permission, like in so many ways, because he's the face of the league and one of the most known athletes in the world. When he stands up for social justice, it makes it easier for all the other players to do so. I thought that was going to happen with Colin Kaepernick in the NFL. Like, I know he was not at the peak of his career when he took a knee, but I thought that when he took that stand that he was a big enough name and had been successful enough that it wouldn't cost him his career. Like, imagine the NBA equivalent of Colin Kaepernick, whatever that we could think of who that is. Yeah, like a super successful player basically being banned from the NBA. Well, that's Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, you know, like as progressive as we think the NBA is now, and it's the best it's ever been. It wasn't that way just 20 years ago. Like even when I had to teach my son, like, son, these two guys, Craig Hodges and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, that I loved as a kid. Like I watched Chris Jackson play for LSU, and we loved this guy. Like, man, these guys had their careers ruined. And it's hard for this new generation to realize that in some ways, both of those guys, Craig Hodges and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, they are still kind of actively banned from the league. The league still won't touch them. And I've talked to both of those brothers, and it's still painful for them. So it's kind of like there's two streets right now where the NBA is super progressive for these current players, but you get these former players who still feel very hurt and left behind by it. And, you know, I'm proud that the NBA has given brothers the space to kind of speak their piece. But, I mean, there's still room to grow for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Mahmoud is still playing in the Big Three, and that's done a lot for him. Because people that didn't know him, they learned a lot about him now from the success he's had in the Big Three, and they're able to learn his story now, you know. And then when a lot of people seen him, that was a big thing for the Big Three, because a lot of people wonder where did he go, what happened to him. So to see him still in great shape at 50, to still be one of the best shooters in the Big Three, like it was refreshing for him to get back on that stage.
Yeah, and it proved right away. It's like, oh, he definitely should have been in the league.
No question.
Like this notion that
one of the best peer scorers ever.
Well, you know, they started making memes of Steph Curry before Steph Curry. They were showing his picture.
Right. But he could have played another 10 active seasons.
No question.
And you see him in the Big Three, and you realize, like, oh, they cut 10 years of this man's career off. You know.
What do you think about LeBron being so outspoken, and then Michael Jordan not really wanting to take that? I mean, I know that's an individual, if you feel comfortable, speak on it, but what are your thoughts when someone such as Jordan has a platform and LeBron has a platform, and we have one guy doing it and one guy not?
Well, you know, so I grew up as a kid, just a young kid, like a huge super fan of Michael. And so, like, when things like the LA riots and the Rodney King beating happened, I didn't understand how pissed people were that Jordan wasn't speaking out. But, like, if there was social media back then, there would have been trending topics about his silence. Like, he wouldn't touch it. But at the same time, there's a part of me, I don't mean to say that wants to give him a pass, but I think he understood, or at least believed, that his calculation was, if I speak out on this, it could jam up my career. Now, there's another part of me that looks at MJ in his prime and thinks, man, you could have said whatever you wanted. Like, he was, we almost have to go back in time. I mean, he was, at one time, the single most popular human being on the planet. Not just athlete. Like, he could do no wrong. And so had he spoken out against police brutality, then damn it, he'd have just spoken out against police brutality.
Right.
So he could have ushered that in. You know, I don't know the calculations that caused him to think it was too risky. But I remember a few years ago where LeBron wasn't speaking out on police brutality and social justice like he is now. This young boy in Cleveland, Tamir Rice, 12 years old, had just been shot and killed. And it took over the whole city of Cleveland, the whole country. And this is in 2014 at like the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. And they had put a mic in front of LeBron's face and asked him what he thought about it. And he basically said he didn't know anything about the case, which was, I thought, one of two things at the time, and I put him on blast on social media for it. If he really didn't know anything about the case, then that's crazy, because it was right there in his city and it took over the whole city. Or he kind of froze in that moment and didn't want to say anything. And the pushback that he got from that, I'm not saying it was the pushback that caused him to say, I need to do more.
But it was the pushback that caused him to say, I need to do more.
Yeah, I mean, I think he felt like even Tamir's family was hurt by it. And I think when he saw that, I think it stung. And I've worked with hundreds of guys in the NBA and NFL. What I know is every day brothers are making these quick calculations about what's okay to say, what's not okay. And I think whatever LeBron messed up on a few years ago, he has more than made up for it over these past few years. Like, even when I see him just after the game, loving on young brothers and showing new players moves and all, like, even when I look at old school players like Jordan, even before them, like, they weren't even seeing themselves as like mentors of the young guys.
Yeah, he's different.
He's totally different. Yeah, I mean, old school, man, you played the game and left the court.
Right.
And so I think LeBron changed that in a lot of ways. It just, now the older generation is kind of mentoring the younger generation. So it's a good thing.
As athletes are kind of, people expect LeBron to speak up on stuff and Steph and Kyrie and the names go on. I've always wondered why people don't look at Tom Brady. GOAT status, Hall of Famer, best quarterback ever. Why don't people look to Tom Brady to speak up on stuff like that, you think?
That's a good question, man. I mean, Tom Brady, if you think about it, Tom Brady is the Michael Jordan.
No question.
In terms of his skills, his titles, and his almost near silence on anything social, be it Donald Trump, be it racism and bigotry. Like, you gotta really twist that man's arm to get him to even hint that he cares about any social issues in the world. And I think in a lot of ways, white athletes get a major pass on not just issues related to Donald Trump, but white supremacy itself. And it kind of begs this idea that white supremacy is an issue that black folk only are supposed to speak out on, and the opposite is true. Like, if Tom Brady and white athletes spoke out more on bigotry and racism and white supremacy, they could actually impact the people who are advancing it. And those guys are completely silent, man. So Tom gets a complete pass, but there was
Kyle Korver wrote that open letter that I thought was amazing.
Yeah, or there's a guy, the relief pitcher for the Washington Nationals, who just won the World Series, Doolittle. He was the first guy to say he wasn't going to go to the White House when the Nationals were invited there. But he penned this op-ed on why he wasn't going to the White House. And he gave about like 14 or 15 reasons on why he just couldn't do it and be with his wife the next day or be with his family the next day. And the World Series MVP, Rendon, he didn't go. And so you have some white athletes who are doing it. And Doolittle even said in that op-ed, like, he mentioned Long and others of saying, like, hey, there's some other white guys that kind of came before me, and so I see it now as my responsibility. But Tom Brady he's a ghost. And Yeah, I mean, he could do more.
He could further the movement, you know what I mean? And to me, to be fair to these people, to Mike and Tom and whoever, it's always been about being comfortable. Just because you have a platform, you may not be comfortable, you may not be versed in the subject, you may not want to say anything for whatever your reasons, but to me, like, I think there's enough athletes now that are utilizing their platform. We can always use as many as possible. We can always use more races, different races, obviously white and whoever else speaking up on it. But to me, it's something you have to be embrace and something to be comfortable with.
Sure.
On. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I try to see each of these guys, and like you said, including Tom or others, these are people, and you know, it's easy for us to reduce any of these athletes as something other than just a human being,
right?
And sometimes with a guy like Thomas that he might not know, but I still refuse to give him a pass. I mean, there are many issues. Like he said a little bit in defense of Colin Kaepernick, but that's about the most I've ever heard him say. You know,
we know that. You know, you're kind of being an athlete. I know I reached out to you personally a couple times. Athletes come to you and discuss obviously this or maybe something they're going through. And what are some of the messages you give to them and you hope they get from that? Because you say early on, you know, you have a background in education. You know, so you're always educating.
It depends on when guys come to me. Like there are probably 3 scenarios where guys come to me from all sports. One is a guy's in trouble, and he has said something or done something problematic, and he's now trending on Twitter, and people have said, "Hey, you need to go talk to Shaun King, and he'll talk you through this." And I'm okay with that. Like, that's helped me build trust with guys, because they understand that if they come to me, if there's an NBA player who said something during like the height of police brutality a few years ago, and he said something really dumb on Twitter, and he was a top trending topic in the country, and he came to me and was like, he just didn't understand what he said that was wrong. He said something in effect of like, you know, if we handled our situations better with police, there wouldn't be as much police brutality or something. And people were just flaming him on social media. So my job is to kind of educate him behind the scenes without anybody ever knowing what that conversation is about, and trying to say like, here's what you said that was wrong. Here's why it was wrong. Here's why people are pissed. And I get that every few days, man, of a guy who tried to wade into something and just missed the mark, in part because nobody schooled them or educated them on it. I get guys who are asking, like, how do they use their influence on an issue to make a difference in the city they play in or in their hometown where they grew up in. And that's a different situation where I'm trying to help brothers understand, like, here's how you could be a creative foundation or weigh in on social issues that matter. And then one of the things that I get that surprises me is I get players who often are asking me to introduce them to some other athlete. And I think people have this assumption that all athletes know each other.
Yeah, that's not true.
And particularly, like, I found that in the NFL in particular, of it's a brutal sport, and like even in the NBA where you guys are on the court seeing each other, talking with each other, no helmet, and it's competitive, but it's not physically as brutal as the NFL. Most NFL guys, if you didn't go to college with these guys, you're not talking team versus team. So a lot of times I'm introducing NBA players to NFL players, or even guys within the league, because they don't really know each other. And there's not, I think people think there's like a directory, and there's not. And so sometimes I try to be the bridge between players.